I'm not sure when the silence in my apartment started to feel heavier than the walls themselves. Maybe it was last winter, when the cold settled in early and refused to leave. Or maybe it happened long before that, before the lies. Before the night she claimed to be working late. Before I started walking through my own home like a guest trespassing on a life that wasn't mine anymore. My name is Daniel Ward, 48 years old, senior financial analyst at a company that pretends it cares about people. I've lived in the same two-bedroom apartment in downtown Chicago for 9 years. It used to feel warm. Now it's all shades of gray, dust on the shelves, unopened bills on the counter. The ghost of a woman who still technically exists in my life, but hasn't been mine for a long time. The morning everything shifted wasn't dramatic. It didn't explode. It whispered. I woke up before the alarm. The soft glow of the city leaking through the blinds. My wife, Mara, wasn't in bed. That wasn't new. Lately she'd been getting up early, claiming she needed time to reset her mind before work. I lay there for a minute, staring at the ceiling, feeling that dull, familiar pressure in my chest. A kind of quiet dread that had settled in over the past months, like humidity before a storm. I found her in the kitchen, sitting at the table with her phone angled slightly away from me. She did that often, now subtle gestures that once might have meant nothing. But when you've lived with someone for 15 years, even the smallest shift hits like an earthquake. Morning, I said. She flinched, not visibly, but enough that I caught it, the tiny inhale, the stiffening of her shoulders. Oh, hey, she forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Couldn't sleep, I nodded and grabbed a mug from the counter. My hands looked older than I remembered. Veins like thin blue wires, skin a little looser around the knuckles. Stress ages you, but betrayal carves you from the inside. While I poured coffee, I watched her reflection in the kitchen window. She was typing something quickly, then deleting it, typing again, smiling down at the screen in a way she hadn't smiled at me in months. Something twisted deep in my gut. I tried to swallow down. Who are you texting? The question came out softer than I intended. She froze. Just work stuff. At 6:12 in the morning, before I could respond, her phone buzzed. She snatched it up so fast it confirmed everything and nothing all at once. Daniel, I don't want to do this right now, she said, standing up, voice tight. I have a lot on my plate. She always had a lot on her plate. It used to be our plate. Now it was hers alone. And whatever scraps fell off it weren't landing anywhere near me. I should have confronted her then, asked the questions that had been gnawing at the edges of my sanity for weeks. But I didn't. I did what I always did, kept the peace, swallowed the bitterness, pretended not to notice the parts of my life slipping through my fingers. So instead I said, we can talk later. She didn't reply. She grabbed her coat, kissed me on the cheek in a mechanical way that felt rehearsed, and left. The door clicked shut, and the apartment settled into silence again, heavy, accusatory. I stood there for what felt like an hour, staring at the same spot she'd been sitting in. My coffee went cold. My hands went colder. I don't know how long I stayed like that before I finally grabbed my jacket and left for work. Anything was better than standing alone in a place that used to feel like home. Work didn't offer much distraction. Numbers blurred. Colleagues buzzed around me like I was underwater, and they were breathing air I couldn't reach. I tried to focus on quarterly reports, but thoughts kept slipping back to the morning, to her smile at the phone, the way she hid it, the tension under her voice. About noon, I stepped outside onto the company terrace. The air was cold, that kind of sharp Chicago chill that cuts right through your chest. I leaned over the railing and let the wind hit me. That's when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You should know what she's doing. My blood turned to ice. Before I could type a response, another message appeared, this time a photo. I felt the world tilt. There was Mara, my wife, sitting in a dimly lit restaurant, leaning forward, laughing, her eyes lit in a way I hadn't seen in years. And across from her some man I didn't recognize. His hand brushed hers across the table, The timestamp was from last night. The night she told me she was too exhausted to meet me for dinner. My fingers trembled so hard, I nearly dropped the phone. The wind roared against my ears, but beneath it I could hear something crack, something inside me. I stared at the photo until my vision blurred, until I wasn't sure if the cold burning my face was wind or the beginning of something else, something darker. Another message arrived. If you want the truth, come to 1842 West Mason tonight, 9 p.m. Then nothing. No name, no explanation, just a location and an invitation to step into a reality I wasn't sure I wanted but could no longer avoid. I didn't go back inside. I didn't return to my desk. I just stood there, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white, while the city stretched out beneath me, loud, indifferent, uncaring. That was the moment I knew my life was about to split into two. Everything before that message, and everything after, and I wasn't ready for either one. I spent the rest of the afternoon pretending to work. My coworkers passed by my office door with quick nods and shallow smiles, unaware that something inside me had begun to unravel. The photo kept replaying in my mind, looping like a glitch in reality I couldn't escape. By 5 o'clock, I'd read the same sentence in an email 18 times and still couldn't tell you what it said. My pulse hadn't slowed since the message arrived. It sat inside my chest like a foreign object, sharp-edged, pushing deeper every time I breathed. When I finally left the building, the city felt different. Or maybe I did. Chicago in the late evening has this strange duality. Half the streets glow with the warmth of bars and restaurants, and the other half are swallowed by shadows. I walked through both worlds, not belonging to either. My reflection in store windows looked like a man who'd forgotten how to inhabit his own body, shoulders tense, jaw tight, eyes unfocused. By the time I reached my apartment, the sky had turned the color of bruised steel. I unlocked the door quietly, almost timidly, as if the silence inside might shatter if I entered too abruptly. Mara wouldn't be home until 9. At least, that's what she'd told me last night. Now I wasn't sure if anything she said had ever been true. I sat at the dining table and placed my phone in front of me like evidence. The apartment felt even colder than it had that morning. I could still picture her sitting where I was now, typing, smiling, deleting, hiding. It was almost laughable how easily I'd accepted her excuses for months. Work is stressful. I'm overwhelmed. I need space. Space from what? From me? From her own guilt? Or had she needed space to make room for someone else? I rubbed my hands over my face. Exhaustion seeped into my bones. Not the kind that sleep fixes. The kind that comes from pretending everything is fine for too long. At 8:32 p.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Mara. Don't wait up. Late meeting again. My chest tightened with a quiet, grim understanding. I didn't reply. Instead, I stood, grabbed my coat, and stepped back into the night. West Mason was on the edge of a neighborhood caught between gentrification and decay. Trendy cafes sat beside shuttered laundromats. New condos overlooked graffiti-stained alleys. It was the kind of place people passed through but never stopped to think about. The address led me to a narrow building with a flickering streetlight above the entrance. Inside, the hallway smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals and old carpet. A single elevator sat at the end, its metal doors dented and scarred. I pressed the button. The elevator groaned to life. During the slow ascent, I felt my heartbeat echo in the metal cage. I didn't know who had sent the message. I didn't know what waited for me. A trap, a confrontation, a stranger with a twisted sense of entertainment. The doors slid open with a reluctant hiss. Apartment for B. I walked down the dim hallway, the carpet muffling my steps. When I reached the door, I hesitated only a second before knocking. There was a pause long enough for me to consider turning around before the door cracked open. A man stood on the other side. Mid-50s, maybe. Tired eyes. Gray stubble. A face that had seen too much and slept too little. He looked at me like he wasn't sure if I was real, "You're Daniel," he said. Not a question. I nodded. He gestured for me to come in. The apartment was small, sparsely furnished, lit by a single yellow lamp that cast long shadows across the floor. Papers were scattered on the coffee table. A half-empty mug sat beside a laptop. The place looked lived in, but not lived. With. The man closed the door. "My name's Nolan," he said quietly. "We don't have much time." His voice carried a weight that made something in me tighten. Anxiety crawled up my spine. "Who are you?" I asked. "Why did you send me those messages?" He exhaled and rubbed the back of his neck, as if bracing himself. "Because I know what she's doing," he said. "Because I've been where you are." My stomach twisted. "You know Mara." "I know more than you think." I took a cautious step closer. "Then tell me." He walked to the coffee table, picked up a folder, and handed it to me. The paper felt heavy in my hands, like holding a small piece of my own fate. "Open it," he said. Inside were photos. Dozens of them. Printed, time-stamped, organized. Mara entering a hotel. Mara leaving the hotel hours later, hair messy, smile too wide, clothes subtly shifted. Mara at a bar. Mara in a car with the same man from the first photo, his hand on her thigh. Her leaning into him. My vision blurred, anger swelling behind my ribs like a pressure valve ready to burst. But there was something else tucked in the back of the folder, a piece of paper. When I pulled it out, I realized it was a bank statement. Not ours, his. Nolan's single quotas. My eyes scanned the numbers. Repeated withdrawals, transfers, payments to a private investigator. "I spent 2 years trying to prove my wife wasn't lying to me," Nolan said, voice low. "She was. And when I finally confronted her, she walked out and never looked back." I stared at him, still holding the folder. "What does this have to do with me?" He stepped closer, eyes dark and exhausted. "Because the man in the photos with your wife, he's the same man my wife left me for." The floor seemed to shift beneath me. "You're telling me?" "I'm telling you he does this. He targets married women, vulnerable ones, ones he can pull away just far enough to ruin their lives before he moves on to the next." I felt my pulse hammering. "Why show me all this?" "Because I didn't have anyone to warn me," Nolan said softly. "Because maybe you still have time to decide how far you're willing to let this go." His words hung in the air like smoke. I closed the folder, my hands trembling. "Where is he now?" I asked. Nolan studied me, as if weighing whether he should answer. Finally, he nodded toward the window. "He lives 4 blocks from here. Corner of Hastings and Willow." A cold calm settled inside me. Not clarity, something darker. Something that had been waiting for an excuse to surface. Nolan must have seen the shift in my eyes because he raised a hand in warning. "Daniel, be careful. Men like him don't care who they hurt, as long as they're the ones in control." I exhaled slowly. "I'm not here to be careful." Nolan grimaced but didn't argue. When I stepped back into the hallway, folder under my arm, I felt like a man walking out of one life and into another. The elevator doors closed. The descent felt like falling. When I stepped out onto the street again, the night was colder, the city louder, the shadows deeper. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going home. Not yet. I needed to see the man who'd been with my wife. I needed to look him in the eyes. I needed the truth he'd taken from me, even if it meant tearing apart whatever pieces of myself I still had left. I didn't rush. That surprised me. You'd think a man who'd just seen photographic evidence of his wife's betrayal would run through the streets like a creature in pain, but I walked, slow, deliberate, almost calm, like my mind had shifted into a state where everything became clearer, sharper, stripped of emotion. Hastings and Willow was a 20-minute walk from Nolan's building, long enough to reconsider everything, long enough to realize I wasn't reconsidering anything at all. The city moved around me. Oblivious, cars hissed down wet asphalt, neon lights flickered on restaurant signs. A couple laughed outside a bar, the sound cutting through the night like something from another world. Life kept going. Mine felt like it had been put on pause, but the anger beneath my ribs pulsed like a second. heartbeat. When I reached the corner, I stopped. The building was older brick facade, narrow balconies, windows lit in random patches. Second floor, Nolan had said. Third window from the left. I found it immediately. Light on? Blinds tilted just enough to see shadows moving inside. I stood on the opposite sidewalk, watching. Hidden in plain sight, a silhouette crossed the window, a man's outline, tall, broad-shouldered, confident, the kind of presence that fills a room effortlessly, even in shadow. He radiated the arrogance of someone who assumed the world owed him attention. My chest tightened. That was him, the man touching my wife in dim restaurants, the man who leaned into her as if he'd earned it, the man who smiled at her the way she used to smile at me. I couldn't move. Not yet. My thoughts spiraled, looping through every moment of the past 6 months, her late nights, her hidden phone, her sudden distance, her vague excuses. I replayed them with new context, new clarity, and each memory burned hotter than the last. Eventually, I tore my eyes from the window. Across the street, there was a small park, just a patch of grass and a bench under a dying street lamp. I sat there, folding the folder Nolan gave me on my lap. I didn't open it again. I didn't need to. The images were burned into me. My mind drifted back to Mara. I tried to pinpoint the exact moment she'd slipped away from me, not physically, emotionally. Was it 3 months ago when she stopped kissing me goodbye, or last summer when she started treating silence like a refuge instead of a problem? Or was it even earlier? Had she been leaving me long before she met this man? A sickening thought crept in. Maybe she hadn't been stolen. Maybe she'd been waiting for an excuse to walk away. My throat tightened, a raw ache forming in my chest. I wasn't sure if I wanted to cry or scream or disappear entirely. Instead, I sat on that cold metal bench while the night settled around me like a heavy coat. 10 minutes passed, then 20. At some point, the building door opened. I straightened. A man stepped out, his silhouette unmistakable, the same outline from the photos. He wore a black coat, dark jeans, the casual elegance of someone accustomed to being admired. He looked like trouble even from across the street, the kind of man who didn't believe consequences applied to him. He lit a cigarette and leaned against the railing, exhaling smoke toward the sky. I watched him, studied him, hated him, but hate was too easy. What I felt was more complicated, like he represented something bigger than himself, the embodiment of every lie Mara had fed me, every evening she chose to spend somewhere else, every piece of myself I'd handed her without ever expecting she'd use it against me. He checked his phone, smirked, typed something. Was he texting her now? Was she waiting for him? Was she with him earlier tonight while I was sitting alone in our apartment, replaying conversations that suddenly meant nothing? My hands curled into fists. I stood, crossed the street, walked toward him. He didn't notice me until I was a few feet away. When he finally looked up, his eyes flicked over me with a quick, casual assessment, confident, cocky, completely unaware of who I was. "Can I help you?" he asked, exhaling smoke. His voice was smooth, charming, exactly the kind of voice that slips easily into someone's life. I felt something inside me break and settle at the same time. "You're seeing my wife," I said. No build-up, no hesitation. His expression faltered for a split second, but only a split second. Then he straightened, cigarette hanging loosely between his fingers. "Your wife," he repeated, as if the concept bored him. "You'll have to be more specific." That did it. A cold wave washed through me, so sharp and sudden it felt like my emotions had crystallized. "Mara," I said. "My wife is Mara Ward." This time, he reacted. Not fear, not guilt, annoyance. He rolled his eyes. "Jesus." I told her this would happen. Heat surged up my spine. "Told her what?" "That you'd come find me eventually. Guys like you always do, guys like me." He stared at me like he was looking through me. "The ones who think they own someone just because they've been married for too long. The ones who don't realize she's already halfway gone." My jaw clenched so hard my teeth hurt. You don't know anything about us. He chuckled. She tells me everything. My pulse pounded in my ears. He took a slow drag of his cigarette. But don't worry. She'll leave you soon enough. Something snapped, not loudly, not violently, more like a quiet internal tear. I stepped closer. You think this is a joke? I said. It's not personal, man. He flicked ash onto the ground. She came to me. She wanted something you couldn't give her. That's life. The world tilted. A hot, metallic taste filled my mouth. I didn't remember closing the distance. I didn't remember grabbing his coat. I didn't remember shoving him back against the railing hard enough that the metal groaned. He stiffened but didn't look afraid, just irritated. Get your hands off me. You don't get to talk about her, I said, voice low. Not to me. She's not yours anymore, he replied, just as softly. My vision blurred at the edges. For a moment, I imagined hitting him, felt the phantom impact, felt the release, the horrible, desperate relief of it. But the moment passed. I stepped back, chest heaving. He straightened his coat. Unfazed, you're not the first husband to show up here. You won't be the last. Women leave, people change, move on, move on. The phrase echoed inside me like an insult. I turned away, not because I was done, because if I stayed one more second, something irreversible would happen. I walked down the street without looking back, the night swallowing me whole. When I reached the intersection, my phone buzzed. A message from Mara. Daniel, we need to talk. The words hit harder than anything that man could have said. My heart dropped into darkness. I stared at the screen until the cold seeped into my bones. Then I typed back 3 words I didn't recognize as my own. I'm coming home? The walk back home felt unreal, like my body was moving through the city, but my mind was somewhere far behind it, still standing on that sidewalk, still staring into the eyes of the man who had dismantled my life with a casual smirk and a flick of cigarette ash. Every step echoed with a tension so tight it felt like wires inside me were stretching to their breaking point. The streets were quieter now, the light are softening the sounds of the city. Even the traffic seemed distant, muffled by the roar of blood in my ears. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the unbearable pressure of holding myself together. Mara wanted to talk. After all of this. My thoughts spun around that message like a storm caught in a too small room. What did she want to say? A confession? Another lie? Some rehearsed explanation she had practiced in that dim restaurant while laughing at secrets she kept from me. I climbed the stairs to our apartment slowly, listening to the hollow echo of each footstep. The hallway lights flickered overhead, cheap bulbs the landlord never replaced. Funny how many things I tolerated without complaint. Noise from neighbors, cold radiators, a marriage falling apart in silence. Outside the door, I stopped. My key hovered over the lock. A memory hit me so sharply I nearly staggered. Mara on our wedding day, her hand trembling in mine, her smile bright and fragile. I had thought she looked at me like I was the safe choice, the steady ground, the life she wanted to build. Now I didn't know if any of that had been real. I pushed the door open. The apartment was dim, lit only by the small lamp near the sofa. Mara sat there, elbows on her knees, hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles were white. She looked up when I entered. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Her eyes were puffy, like she'd been crying. Her hair was tied back messily. She looked exhausted, guilty, nervous. The guilt struck me hardest. It flickered across her face in a way she didn't have time to hide. Daniel, she whispered. I closed the door quietly behind me. Mara, she stood, took a step toward me, then hesitated like she wasn't sure if she had the right to cross the room anymore. I didn't know if you'd come, she said. You asked me to. She swallowed, her throat tightening visibly. I know we've been distant lately, and I know things haven't been right between us. Her voice cracked at the edges. I waited for the lie. It was coming, I could feel it. I wanted to talk because... She paused. Because I owe you the truth. My pulse stuttered. Truth. She used that word so easily. I walked past her and hung my coat over the chair. I didn't sit. I didn't want to sit. If I sat, the walls would close in. Mara, I said slowly, how long have you been seeing him? Her breath caught. A small sound escaped her lips, a fractured syllable of shock. What? She whispered. Daniel, don't, I said, sharper than I intended. Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. She stared at me, eyes wide, her whole body going still. For a moment, I saw the truth flicker behind her expression, raw, unfiltered, undeniable. Then she looked away. How did you? Her voice trembled. Who told you? So, it's true. My voice felt foreign in my own mouth. You didn't even deny it. Tears filled her eyes. I wanted to. God, Daniel, I tried to say it wasn't true, but it is. I finished for her. She sank onto the couch, hands covering her mouth. Her shoulders shook. I watched her cry, and something inside me twisted violently. Not sympathy, not anymore. Something else? Something darker. How long? I repeated. She wiped her eyes with shaking fingers. 5 months, 5 months. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. 5 months of lies. 5 months of distractions. 5 months of her coming home late, turning her phone away from me, blaming stress, blaming work, blaming everything except the truth. I sat down slowly on the chair across from her, because my legs no longer trusted themselves. Why? I asked, my voice barely audible. She looked up, mascara smudged, face blotchy, vulnerable. That used to mean something to me, Daniel. She exhaled shakily. I don't know when it happened. I didn't plan it. I was lonely. You were always working, always tired, always somewhere else, even when you were here. And then I raised a hand. Don't say his name. Her mouth closed instantly. She lowered her gaze. I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't mean to. I laughed, a short, bitter sound I didn't recognize. You lied to my face every single day. You kissed me goodnight and then went to him. You told me you were exhausted. You told me you just needed space. She winced. I know, and I hate myself for it. Do you? I whispered. Or do you just hate that you got caught? Her eyes filled again. She looked small, fragile, broken even, but I felt nothing that resembled pity. I leaned forward. Were you going to leave me? She didn't answer. That was my answer. I nodded slowly. So, he was worth throwing away 15 years. No, she said quickly. No, Daniel, it's not like that. Then what is it like? My voice was low, controlled, dangerously calm. She pressed her palms to her face. He made me feel seen, wanted. I was losing myself, and I didn't know how to talk to you without hurting you. You hurt me anyway. She let out a sob. I know. A long, suffocating silence stretched between us. Finally, Mara lowered her hands, eyes red and raw. I ended it, she said. My heart thudded. When, last week, I told him I couldn't do it anymore, that I needed to fix things here, with you, last week. But she was with him last night. I saw photos. I said quietly, time-stamped. From yesterday. Her face drained of color. That's not possible. It is, I said. And I saw him tonight. She recoiled. You what? You talked to him? Yes, Daniel. She stood as if to approach me, but I didn't move. She lowered her hands helplessly. What did he say? He said you'll leave me soon enough. I met her eyes. And that you tell him everything. No, she whispered. No, Daniel, that's not. He twists things. He manipulates people. I tried to cut him off. He wouldn't listen. Her panic seemed real, too real. A new, colder fear stirred inside me. Mara, I said slowly, is he dangerous? She hesitated. Only a heartbeat, but it was enough. I stood. What aren't you telling me? Her voice broke. He wasn't supposed to follow me after I ended it. My stomach tightened. Follow you? She nodded, trembling. He shows up everywhere. My work, my gym, the coffee place near the office. He texts me from different numbers, calls from blocked ones. I didn't want to tell you because I was afraid of what you'd think of me. The room spun. 5 months of betrayal. And now this. He's not letting you go, she whispered. A chill crawled through me. I thought of Nolan's tired eyes, the bank statements, his warning. I thought of the man's smirk tonight, the arrogance, the absolute confidence that no one could touch him. And suddenly, everything clicked. This wasn't just an affair. It was a pattern. He wasn't stealing wives. He was collecting them. Mara took a shaky breath. Daniel, I'm scared. The words hit me like a blow to the chest. For the first time all night, emotion cracked through the numbness inside me. Fear, not for myself, for her. I walked toward the window, staring out into the dark street below. He's not going to stop, I said quietly. Behind me, Mara whispered, what are we going to do? I turned back to her. The anger was still there, the betrayal still raw. But beneath all of it, something else surged, a grim, cold resolve. I'm going to talk to him again, I said. She shook her head violently. Daniel, no please. He threatened our life, I said. One way or another. Her voice trembled. But I don't care who he is. My tone was final. The room fell silent, the kind of silence that comes right before a storm breaks. Because something inside me had already shifted. And whatever came next, there was no going back. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I sat by the window of my apartment, watching the city lights flicker like the pulse of something dying but still refusing to let go. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My thoughts kept spiraling through everything that had happened, the revelations, the half-truths, the photographs, the recordings, the way Melissa looked at me in the end. That mix of fear, regret, and something else I still couldn't name. It's strange how you can spend years believing you know someone, believing you've mapped every angle of their smile, every hesitation in their voice, and then, in a single week, you discover that the relationship you held together by memory alone had been drifting toward its own slow collapse long before any betrayal surfaced. I used to think betrayal was a moment, a sharp cut, a sudden fall. But it wasn't. It was erosion. Quiet, unannounced, patient. By sunrise, I still hadn't moved from the chair. When my phone finally vibrated, I half expected it to be her. Some last attempt at an apology, a plea, a confession. But the name on the screen was one I hadn't seen in years. Marcus Hale, an old colleague. And one of the last people I'd trust during a crisis like this. I hesitated before answering. Ethan, he said, skipping any greeting. You need to see something. The tone in his voice made my chest tighten. Calm, controlled, but laced with an urgency you couldn't fake. I didn't want more revelations. I didn't want more pieces of this puzzle that had already swallowed the last remnants of my sanity. But something told me I didn't have a choice anymore. Maybe I never did. Send it, I muttered. A second later, a file arrived. A video, grainy security footage. Time-stamped a week before everything fell apart. My breath caught in my throat when I pressed play. It was Melissa, in my office building. At almost midnight. She wasn't alone. I leaned forward, staring at the silhouette beside her, tall, broad-shouldered, familiar to familiar. And when he turned toward the camera, the room around me seemed to tilt. It was Daniel Ross, my coworker, my friend, the same man who'd told me, just days earlier, that he barely knew Melissa. I replayed the footage again, slower this time. Their bodies were angled closer than casual conversation allowed. His hand brushed her arm, soft, deliberate. She didn't pull away. She leaned in. My throat felt tight, as if something had lodged itself inside it and refused to move. But the worst part wasn't the closeness. It wasn't the late hour. It wasn't the fact that they were somewhere they shouldn't have been. It was what Daniel handed her, a flash drive. The same model as the one that had vanished from my desk around the time the Phillips account fell apart. The same one the firm had accused me of mishandling. The same event that had nearly cost me my job. I pressed pause. Everything inside me went painfully, sickeningly still. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It wasn't just emotional. It was professional, intentional, coordinated. My mind replayed every conversation we'd had in the last year. Every moment Melissa had asked about my work, my projects, The deadlines, the internal conflicts within the team. Every time Daniel had casually asked to double-check something I was working on. Every small, seemingly innocent coincidence that now looked like part of something larger, something colder. I stood up, pacing, trying to breathe through the rising panic. Or maybe it wasn't panic. Maybe it was clarity. A clarity so sharp it burned. I called Marcus back. "How long have you known?" I asked. A pause. "Long enough. I didn't have proof until now." "Why send it to me?" Another pause. "Because you deserve to know who actually did it." I closed my eyes. "They set me up." "Yes," he replied. "And they almost got away with it." My apartment felt claustrophobic. The walls too close. I grabbed my coat without thinking, keys trembling in my hand as I headed for the door. The city was waking up outside. But I felt miles away from everyone in it, as if I had slipped into a different reality altogether. One built entirely out of betrayal. I didn't know where I was going at first. I just drove, street after street, until the traffic thinned and I found myself in front of a place I'd avoided for weeks, Melissa's building. I shouldn't have gone in. I shouldn't have wanted to see her. But closure is a dangerous idea. It pretends to offer peace while dragging you deeper into the parts of yourself you'd rather never face. She opened the door after only a single knock. She looked exhausted, eyes swollen, hair messy, skin pale. Not the woman from the footage. Not the woman who had dismantled my life piece by piece. Just someone lost in the consequences of her own choices. "Ethan," she whispered. I stepped inside before she could say anything else. "Why, Daniel?" I asked. No anger, no shouting, just the question I'd been trying to outrun. She froze. "I never meant for any of this." "Don't lie to me now," I said quietly. Her mouth trembled. It wasn't about him. It was about us. The way things were falling apart. The way you stopped talking to me. The way I shook my head. That doesn't explain the flash drive. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything she'd said up to now. She didn't deny it. She didn't defend herself. She just lowered her gaze. That was the moment I finally understood. She hadn't stumbled into betrayal. She had walked toward it, step by step, even when she knew exactly what it would destroy. When I left her apartment, the morning had fully broken. People were rushing by, heading to work, living their simple, unbroken lives. I envied them for a second, then I didn't, because the truth was this: I wasn't the man I'd been a week ago. I wasn't even sure who I was now. But I knew one thing: this story wasn't over. Not by a long shot.